When it comes to learning a new language, I think the very first and most important step is to choose the right language for you to make sure that you have consistent motivation and a reason to learn that language. If you choose the wrong language or something that you think is the right one but it isn't, it could lead to a very quick decline in motivation, and therefore you believe that language learning as a whole either isn't for you or it's just so boring that you don't want to do it ever again with any other language. And so I think it's very important to choose the right language for you and your personal situation and your personal likes and desires and everything else that goes into it. And in this video, I would like to go over a few things that I think is going to help you to choose the right language for you. I think the very first question you should ask yourself when you're trying to pick a language is there any kind of reason that you're going to pick this particular language? For example, do you enjoy the food of the country? Have you traveled to the country and just really enjoyed a particular place in that country? Did the people or the culture speak to you differently than other countries and languages? Do you have a background in it in regards to your genetics, and maybe you're a third generation German or something? Maybe you have a partner or a friend that speaks another language. There's so many different reasons why you may choose to learn a particular language. And these are some of the questions I think is very important to ask, or at least things to think about before choosing a language and dedicating full time into. If you still don't know which language to choose, I would then recommend to do something like go on Duolingo and have a bit of fun with a whole bunch of different languages. Languages maybe you've never even thought of, languages that maybe you're kind of toying with. Just try as many as you can to see which ones speak to you differently. And I say Duolingo, one, because it is free, and two, because there is a decent amount of languages to choose from. I wouldn't recommend to stick with Duolingo for a long time, but certainly use Duolingo to kind of get a feel for each language. You could also use other apps such as Memrise, but I would recommend an app that is free, or a way that you can access the language for free, that you can get a feel for the language both written and also audible if possible. So maybe even go on YouTube and try and find videos in those languages, such as the YouTube channel Easy Languages. You can look for Easy Spanish, Easy German, Easy Chinese, etc. And you can get a feel for the languages both by listening to the language and also by looking at the subtitles on screen and seeing the written form of the language as well. You'll be surprised if you look into a whole bunch of languages which ones may stick out to you and which ones may not. And I think it's very important to just spend a week or two just kind of dabbling with a whole bunch of different languages to get an idea of what you're going to get yourself into. And also maybe there's going to be a secret language or a hidden language that you didn't know about, and actually this is going to be your language that you want to learn. But sometimes maybe you're juggling between 3 or 4 different languages and you really don't know which one to choose. I kind of had this when I chose Polish. I had at the time the decision between Russian, Polish, Czech, and also I kind of was interested in Ukrainian, but wasn't as much as the other 3. And so if we look at those 4 languages, I kind of started to ask myself, well, out of Russian, Ukrainian, Czech and Polish, immediately Ukrainian is not quite as much of an interest for me as the other 3 at that point in time. So then I had Russian, Polish and Czech, which at the time were kind of equal to me in terms of how interested I was in those languages. But what really helped me personally was the fact that I had visited Poland and also the Czech Republic, and so immediately they kind of stood out more to me than Russian, and so I kind of decided to eliminate Russian for now, and so now I was left with Polish and Czech as a language to learn. Now there's more that went into it, but to keep it simple, I thought it would be a lot more useful for me to learn a language such as Polish, because here in the UK we now have something like 700,000 Polish speakers here in the UK, so I would be able to practice spoken Polish basically whenever I wanted to. I would just have to go out and maybe meet a Polish person, which I've been able to do quite a few times. Overall, the country of Poland has more speakers than the country of Czechia, which means that Poland just has more opportunities for me to speak the language. Plus, I enjoy traveling. Poland is a bigger country in land area than the Czech Republic. And there were some other reasons why, but that's kind of boiled down to me saying I just would like to learn Polish at this point. This also happened only a few months after I did a 6-day trip in Poland, which I really enjoyed, and that kind of really drew me to the language as well. But I was very interested in Czech because I'd been to Czechia before a few times, so that was like a very big contender with Polish. But because of the fact there were so many Polish speakers here in the UK, I just figured it would be more useful for me to learn Polish, and also I'd be able to use it a lot more often here in the UK without having to always travel to the particular country. So that for me was my own personal experience with deciding between 3 or 4 different languages and boiling it down to just the one. It may be a bit more difficult for you or a bit easier for you to decide which one out of the few selected that you want to choose and which ones you don't. but I would really recommend to just really think about it and choose whichever language speaks to you the most. And if you still are undecided, looking into both languages until you kind of figure out which one is more obtainable, which one is easier to learn maybe, which one is going to be easier to practice. There's all kinds of different questions you can ask yourself, and ultimately it does boil down to the individual and also your individual needs. If you're juggling between two languages still and you really can't choose between them, maybe study them both, but I would really recommend not to study both of them at the same time. Start just one of them and get to a decent enough level in that language where you're comfortable with that language, and then start the second one when you feel like the first language is at a good level where you're not going to forget or confuse the language with the second language. Especially if this is going to be your first language that you're deciding to learn, it is very important to stick with just one language if your goal is to get a really good level within this language, because if you're studying 2 or 3 or 4 different languages, such as myself, then it can become really difficult to juggle these languages, and especially if you start 2 at the exact same time, it is going to become pretty difficult for you in a lot of different scenarios. For example, mixing up the words in the languages, especially if you decide to learn Spanish and Italian at the exact same time, there are bound to be words that you're going to mix up. You're going to speak a hybrid of the 2 languages, and it's more important, I believe, to start just one of them. Choose Spanish, for example, get a good level in Spanish, then go on and start Italian maybe a year or 2 down the line when you've got a good, decent understanding of Spanish, and then you can go into Italian. You're way less likely to mix up the languages, and because of your initial understanding of Spanish, if you're going into the second language, which is going to be similar as the first one, such in my example with Spanish and Italian, you're going to pick up that Italian a lot quicker, or that second language a lot quicker, because a lot of the words are going to be similar, the grammar is going to be similar, etc. So if you're choosing Czech and Polish, or Polish and Ukrainian, if you choose one, the second one is going to be slightly easier because you already understand similar grammar points and similar vocabulary, etc. But if you try to go for both of them at the exact same time, it is not going to work out well for a majority of people. So to summarize, ask yourself the question whether you need a particular language for a particular reason. Ask yourself whether there's a language that sticks out due to historical reasons or family history or things alike. Go onto apps such as Duolingo or Memrise or other apps which do not cost you money in order to get a feel for a whole bunch of different languages, and then pick out the ones that you think are going to be interesting for you to learn. And try your best to funnel it down to pick just one language that you're going to say, I'm going to dedicate my time to this language and see how far I can get into it. And like I say, if you're going to want to pick 2 languages and you don't know which one to pick, just pick one and just decide you're going to go with this one, and then leave the second one kind of sitting there for a year or 2 and then go to that language. It's going to be a lot more beneficial for you to dedicate your time to one language only and then go to the next one when you're ready to go to that next one. If you still have any questions whatsoever about this topic and you're struggling between picking a language, comment your questions down below in the comment section and let me know. I'll do my best to get around and answering questions and do my best to give you the best advice that I can give you. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe in this video, and with all that out of the way, thank you guys so much, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.